$230,000 business funding framework. Here's what we're going to cover in this training. The exact banks used in this process. I'm going to give them to you off the jump. Like you're going to see that right here in this next section. I will say, however, the rest of this, in order for that to work, the rest of this has to be put into play, which is why people often ask, what are the banks? What are the banks? You can have all the banks in the world. And if you don't know how the business is set up properly and how to actually sequence the funding, then it just defeats the purpose of knowing the banks altogether. And so this is just a small percentage of what it actually takes to make this entire system work, which is why I'm going to give it to you here in this video. How the business needs to be set up, super important to know. Super important to know the line of work involved in this business. In other words, the industry that this business owner was working in, what the working capital was used for. Also important to know, especially when you're dealing with business bankers, how you're actually planning on rolling out and deploying that working capital that they're going to give you access to. The cadence used when applying for the funding, in other words, the timing for the funding, the banks, the order of how everything needs to be set up when you're applying for your business credit lines, and then the structuring of the business credit profiles and checking for accuracy when you're being underwritten for approvals. I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot all of this here in this training. But let's get probably one of the most common questions that I get asked quite a bit is, Irv, what are the banks that I can go for? Now, full disclosure, this business right here is located in Florida. And so depending on where you're located in the country, you may or may not have these banks. But starting off at the top, we had Fifth Third Bank, revolving business line of credit. They got access to $75K. South State Bank, $35K. And this is on a 0% business credit card. Seacoast Bank, $40K for a 0% business credit card as well. And then Wells Fargo, revolving business line of credit, $80K, which gives us the grand total of $230. Now, there is something that I want to point out, and that's with South State Bank and Seacoast Bank. To the naked eye, you may think that these are two different banks, and they are. But both these banks have something in common, and they are being underwritten by a third-party company known as Elon Financial. That's important data for you to know, because sometimes, and I see this all the time actually, where someone goes into a bank and we're taking a look at their business and we're helping them go through an audit when they come to us of, hey, why have I gotten denied so many times? And then we'll say, okay, well, which banks have you tried applying for? And we'll see the sequence that they may be laid out or some of the banks that they were denied by. And once we take a look, we'll say, wait a minute, you have 5 banks here, but all 5 banks are being underwritten by the same third-party company. Elon Financial, by the way, is just one of these third-party companies, just so that you know. But that's important to know, because you may think, like clients that we've serviced, well, there's 5 different banks, so what happens? Why am I getting denied? And again, the reason for that is because it lands inside of the same lending pool, meaning you submitted 5 applications, but they're all falling into the Elon Financial bucket. So if you got one denial, then that's going to trigger an automatic denial for the other 4, which we see it time and time again. Or you'll maybe get approved for one account, and then all of a sudden the other 4 accounts kind of catch on. They'll say, wait a minute, you've already gotten a credit line with this bank for X amount. No, you're good. Like, you've already kind of tapped out with us. And so that's when you get what I call that sea of red, and you start getting those denials. Something to keep in mind when it comes to Fifth Third and Wells Fargo, they have their own underwriting, in-house underwriting. And so they have their own algorithm. They have their own underwriters. They have their own bankers taking a look at the applications. So that's why when you submit this application and you submit this application, I would say it's clear cruising, because they're going to have their own lending criteria, which we'll be breaking down some of that here in this video as well. But again, total amount is $230 for the products combined. If that's all you came to see, then there you have it. But if you actually want to know how this thing works and how to actually make the system work in your favor, then keep listening, because now we're diving into the industry, the type of industry that this business was involved in, and then the setup. Now, they were originally set up as a sole proprietor. We see this a lot, where somebody comes in as a sole prop, and maybe they have an LLC set up on the side, or maybe they started as a sole prop and then they started venturing off into the land of LLCs, whether a single member or a multi-member. That was the case here. So this gentleman started off as a sole prop originally, and then he ventured off into the land of LLCs, which is what I like to see. whether LLCs, corps, S corps. We love to see it, right? So for the purpose of this case study, we're looking at a single member LLC, which is just him running his operations. So not, and this isn't too far fetched, but we see this from time to time again, where the LLC is used for maybe a couple of different things. So, in this situation, he has a roofing company, but every now and again he'll come across a good deal, and then he'll do the rehabs for maybe a real estate project that he wants to personally invest in himself. We see that from time to time again, especially those of us that are involved in construction, for those of us that are maybe more hands-on contractors, where we have our business, we're doing the roofing for our clients, but we'll see a project that we can maybe purchase for ourselves to start building out our real estate portfolio, which is the story here. So whenever I see this, and again, whenever we see this, typically the way that the bank is going to grade it is going to be a construction-based business or construction industry. Now, this is normally seen as a higher risk industry to the banks. So having everything set up is even more important compared to someone who's maybe involved in a lower risk industry. This means that you definitely have to have all of your ducks in a row in order for this to work. So even though the LLC was just under 3 years old when they started transitioning from the sole prop to the LLC side, what we did was we wanted to make sure that they were set up properly with the bank, and that they were setting up their business properly so that it was positioned in a way that the banks wanted to actually lend to them. So this is what I call kind of like the 3 steps or the 3 pieces that we took a look at. And it varies by business, but these were like the 3 main ones for this construction business. The first one was a trail, which is what you see right here. They were involved in construction, specifically roofing, even with the sole prop. That's important to note because the line of work continued being the same venturing into the LLC, which was something that the bank wanted to know. Hey, is this a completely brand spanking new business that we're doing? Or is it kind of like a carryover? No, it's a carryover. Okay. Since it's going to, carry on, and since it's just not even a full-blown new business, but just the entity itself being the LLC, we can actually go and backdate some of the business, some of the maybe payments that were received, some of the transactions, some of the deals that had gone through, and we can use that to then stabilize the business as it being maybe a business that's been around longer than what it seems to be on paper. Again, with that LLC just being 3 years old. Second thing that we helped position was the cash flow, which is what you see here. So the cash flow was consistent over the last 180 days when they went to go apply for funding. Now, banks don't like to see, and I have it here for us, fluctuations in income. This is a big red flag of how the business is perceived. And most banks don't want to deal with businesses with inconsistent revenue or reserves. So I'm going to give you a pro tip here. Whenever you are going, this is like a framework that I walk our clients through. Whenever you're going to go for your first funding round or your second funding round or your third funding round, however many rounds you're going through, you always want to time it. And here's what I mean by that. Especially for every business has a season where they have their highs and lows. It's not in your best interest if you're going to apply for business credit lines and you are in the middle or you're just coming off of a slow season. You always want to pace it to where you have the most amount of cash that's hit your account, and then use that muscle and flex that muscle to the banks and say, hey, these are my reserves. Hey, this is how much cash flow we had in the last 3 months, the last 6 months. Obviously, if you have your tax returns, you can always flex that muscle as well. But the reason why you wanted to set it up this way is because there's nothing worse than you have a legitimate business, but you just mistime it. And then you go into the bank and they say, okay, well, we can approve you for that 75K line, 80K line, 120K line, but can you provide the last 90 days of not tax returns, the last 90 days of your bank statements? And then what ends up happening is you end up shooting yourself in the foot because you're coming off of a slow season, which isn't normally how your line of work is. Now, on the contrary, the reverse of that is, let's say that your high time is January, February, March, April. Let's say that you're a tax preparer, as an example, and you wanted to go for your funding round. I would venture off to say you want to pace it to where you're starting that big funding round, starting in around April, May, June. That'll be the cadence that I'm looking at, which we're going to be diving more into here in just a second. But the reason why I'm looking at it that way is because in the event that if and when the bank says, hey, can you provide, again, those bank statements? I say, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you know that you just came off of a high time with consistent revenues and with consistent reserves in your accounts. And then lastly, this business owner had a banking partnership. So they were already established specifically with Wells Fargo. Now, business owners who already have either a personal account, and I'm always recommending this, either a personal account, a business account is another big one, or if you just have personal cards, you can always use that as a bridge to continue to build out that partnership. Another way put, to build out the relationship with that bank, especially if maybe you're using some of the cash flow that you're getting to fund projects, then you can also do that here, right? Where you have the cash flow and that cash flow is hitting your account, but then you, again, apart from you having the personal account, you have the business account that you opened up. And so now you start transitioning. Okay, I no longer want all these funds if I was operating as a sole prop, hitting my personal account. I now wanted to funnel it in through my business account, which is where that cash flow on projects completed comes in handy. Moving on, business address swap was the other part that we helped them take a look at, was a big bottleneck in their business. So the business address that was being used was pointing back to what looked like a post office. That's a big no-no with banks. We've done full videos on business addresses and what you want to look for. Even if, and again, they were using a virtual office, but even if you're using a virtual office address, you always want to run it through a business address audit, which we had them do. Banks downgrade applications altogether if they look like it's I would say a commercial mail receiving agency. That's a big no-no. That's pretty much a office that's receiving mail on your behalf. You never want it to look like that, which is why you want to run the audit. And then secondly, if that address is attached to maybe a piece of news or a news article where maybe potential fraud or a scam or something scandalous happened at that location, that gets linked to the business address that you're using. Again, assuming you're not brick and mortar. This is for those of us who maybe have virtual office addresses. That's what you want to pay attention to, which is what we found with this address, which is why we did the swap altogether. So updates had to be made everywhere before starting the funding sequence. I'm going to give you guys more details on how you want to update your business addresses, but the business address was updated everywhere before starting the funding sequence. You want to make sure that the information is always matching across the board prior to starting your funding rounds. Now, the third piece that we looked at was proper business classification. Now, with higher risk industries, especially construction, real estate, this is even more important. So you want to make sure that with higher risk industries, whenever they require licensing, it's important to set up your corp and your LLC because of the liability. Banks don't like to see a high risk industry and somebody comes in as a sole prop. Banks don't like to see if somebody is high industry or high risk industry, they don't have all of their licensing in place or up to date, because sometimes they'll ask you for that. Okay, your general contractor or your licensing to be put up, to put up, example, windows or to be able to do roofing in this county. You have your LLC intact, but all of a sudden your licenses are maybe expired, or vice versa. All your licenses are in place, but you don't have an LLC. And so typically with those high risk industries, get yourself the corp set up, obviously even just to protect yourself, or get yourself the LLC. And this is due to the liability and the nature of the business. Banks are weary of businesses who are operating this way and who are, seen as themselves and seen as sole props that are looking for capital. Banks like to run away from that, and they're going to say, "Yeah, we're good. We're gonna go ahead and deny this file for now. You can come back around to us maybe some other time, but right now we're not going to approve you." Now, what is the working capital used for? The reason why I wanted to add this on here was because, especially if you are newer to business, is you just want to get as much capital as possible, which is why I like to give this framework to people, because it allows you to really think through, okay, what exactly am I going to be using this capital for? So that if and when a bank is going to ask you, okay, what's it going to be deployed toward, you know exactly what to tell them. Like you don't even have to think twice. This is where it's going. This is how much we're going on ad spend. This is how much we're going to our labor. This is how much our materials cost. And it's just bang, bang, bang. Especially when you start looking at other products like SBA loans, You really want to have this dialed in. So you want to know exactly, like I mentioned earlier, what you will be using the capital for that the banks give you. So having a legitimate plan in place is always important. You want to have this ready to go because it allows you to stand out from the tire kicker applicants that they get every single day. Believe me, guys, I talk to bankers on the daily. I ask them, hey, like, what's the main thing that just annoys you? And they just flat out say, people don't know their actual business. They just want money, but they don't actually know how the heck they're actually going to make that money grow. Or if we give them a 50K line, they don't know where to deploy it. They just saw something on social media, they saw something online, and think it's just as easy as walking into the bank and asking us for it. And they're really starting to vet out, especially as the economy turns, things tighten up a little bit. They really start to vet people out just off the answers and just the information that they get that sounds contradictory to what they typically get based off of the industry. So if you come in and you don't know your numbers and you're in construction and they've already dealt with 30 real construction and small businesses in your area and you come in not knowing what the heck you're talking about, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, which is why you want to have your game plan in place. And really what it boils down to is in side tangent, but it's important. If you've been running a legitimate business, then you know your numbers. If you've been running legitimate operations, then you know what it takes. You know where that capital is going to go. You know how much labor it costs. You know where to find the workers. You know where to find the contractors. You know how much it's going to cost you every time you go to Home Depot, right? And so you're not making stuff up. You're just literally telling the bank, this is what I do day in, day out. So it's a lot easier to speak from experience than it is from just trying to make something up because you think it's cool, which is why working with legitimate businesses is what bankers look for. Again, you could be a startup, but just know your numbers as you start to venture off into the world of business. Now, for this roofing company, it was going to be used for the following. They wanted to lock down multiple deals instead of having to wait to receive payouts from projects. If you are in construction, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're in real estate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can only move as fast as your next closed deal. You can only move as fast as your next paid invoice, right? So you're usually fronting the cash and then you're having to work to get that project done and then you're getting paid at the end. So that's the first place that this capital was going to be deployed toward, was to pick up future projects. They were going to use it to hire better subcontractors. So you're seeing the train of thought of where the funding was going to go toward, which is why I wanted to give you this. They were going to be using the funding to get subcontractors who specialize in their specific aspects of construction. So if I'm a roofing company and maybe I'm working on a rehab and I may not be as good at installing windows, then maybe getting a subcontractor, I'll front the materials for the windows, but I'm going to hire you to actually install the windows. Or I'm going to hire you to maybe do the granite inside of the property while I'm up working on the roof. And again, reverse engineer this for your own business so that way you become a more complete business owner when you're acquiring funding. Lastly, is they want to land bigger projects with better margins, which means that they're able to make more money after it's all said and done. A lot of the issues that people tend to run into is that you tend to get stuck with what you can get based off of where you're at. And that's, everyone starts somewhere, but you don't want to stay there, which is why as you start scaling your business, you want to start thinking bigger picture. Okay, when I get access to $150,000 in business credit, these are the type of projects that I'm going to go after. When I get access to 250K in funding, these are the type of maybe supplies I need to get to scale my store, to scale my e-commerce store, in order for me to, in this case, in order for me to pick up the real estate properties that I know are going to be able to turn a bigger profit. Because if not, then you're always fighting for scraps in the market, which is not where you want to be. So having that plan in place, apart from you being able to stand out in the banks, you also stand out in the marketplace. And again, you become a more complete business owner, which is why I wanted to make this video. Now, super important, the cadence used when acquiring funding. In other words, the timing of how you want to go through the process and how you properly, I would say, how you want to set it up, meaning how you want to go through each application and what you want to avoid along the way. I wanted to include both on here just because I think a lot of people screw it up and I don't want you to be one of them. So first part of this with the cadence is funding rounds occur in 30 to 60 day timeframes. This means that from the time, and I'm assuming you already have an account with the bank, or if you don't, you typically want to wait at least 30 to 60 days, even prior to this. So you want to give yourself a buffer of when you open the account with the bank, Let's say you deposit your first $5,000 with the liquidity side of it, so that way they see that there's consistent reserves, and then you want to wait, you want to chill out for a little bit, right? If you start rushing the process too quickly, banks see that as an immediate need for capital, and that actually turns them off. So you want to play it cool whenever you're going through the process, because if you try to speed it up, then again you're seen as a higher risk to them, and they're going to say, wait a minute, why do you need this capital so fast? Like, is there something that you're not selling us? So spacing it out. Once that's done, and assuming you've already done that, that 30 to 60-day time frame from the moment that you submit the first, let's say, banking application, either in person or online, usually takes about 30 days for you to start getting, by the time you actually get the funds in your account, but for you to properly see all those applications through, because sometimes applications get put in holding window, which can last anywhere between 7 to 21 days, which is why I wanted to give you this buffer right here. Now, having accounts set up with the banks that you're looking to apply for prior to the applications is going to be crucial. This means that if I know I'm going to be, let me go back up top. If I know that I'm going to be hitting Fifth Third, South State, Seacoast, and Wells Fargo, then I want to know that ahead of time. I don't just want to come up with that and then do it the next day. I want to have that already premeditated 1 week out. So that way I can get my docs in order. I can see, okay, who do I need a relationship with? Who do I need to go speak to? Should I apply for this in person? Do I already have a connection at the bank that I can maybe go talk to? Say, hey, I know that when I came here, I had my personal accounts, but now I've been operating this business, but I never presented it to you. You want to inform the banker of what you're actually doing. Again, on the business side, if you're able to, and if you actually have access to those resources, and if you do, then I 100% recommend it. Which is what we always set up our clients for, either with our bankers that are vetted, or we show them how to properly go into a bank and introduce themselves, introduce their businesses, and also present it in a way that's appealing to the banks so that they can give them those easier approvals that they're seeking. Big mistakes that I want you to avoid is applying without opening an account first. Big no-no. Second big no-no is applying for everything at once. You want to space everything out properly. I don't recommend, and when I say this, here's what I mean, because there's like a double-edged sword here. You don't want to wait, because I see this too, is somebody who gets excited and say, well, I got a $50,000 business line of credit, and then they wait a month to apply for the rest of the funding sequence. So that's like the extreme. The other side of this is they apply for a business line of credit, business credit card, and like 2 checking accounts on the same day. Too much, too fast, right? Too much, too fast. You want to space it out. So I typically like to see, especially if I'm going for double products inside of the same bank. So if I'm going for a business credit card and a business line of credit inside the same bank, I'll probably go for the business credit card first. And then I'll probably wait maybe about a week. And then I'll go back in and apply for the business line of credit. Unless it's like a bank where I can do both the same day and I'm working physically with the banker and they say, hey, let's do both now. Cool. We're going to do both now. But in most instances, I'm going to get one product first, wait for the approval. I physically have that product in my hand, and then I'm going to go back in for the second or third product at that bank. The third mistake that I see is putting unrealistic or inaccurate revenue or income numbers. Know your numbers, both on the personal side and on the revenue side. And if you don't have your revenue in terms of actual tax returns, then you want to be able to project properly specific to your industry. Don't just put 350 on something because you saw it online. Don't just put 450 on something because you saw it online. It all varies based off of your personal credit. So banks can see, especially since you're personally guaranteed, they can see how big your personal credit lines have been. That's a big part. Where you're located or where you're applying for like what state or what region of the country. So that has to do with it, with the median household income, and also the median, which is the third part. Also the median or the average of what the business is for that specific industry that you're applying for, what that type of business actually generates. So I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. 450 in a trucking in the trucking industry, or matter of fact, I'll keep this example. 450 for roofing in the middle of SoCal is totally different from 450 in the middle of Iowa. It just is what it is. And so you always want to be watchful of those numbers and be true to those numbers. And again, it makes it easier if you've actually done this thing and you have your own numbers that you can use, because then you can use your own averages. Rushing through each bank, which I mentioned kind of up top, which is applying for everything at once, but rushing through each bank is a big no-no, and not taking time to set everything up with the accounts, partnerships, having money in the account. If you have a product, if it's a personal account, making sure that the utilization isn't past 30% because banks have total credit exposures. And you want to make sure that that's lower than 30% as you go back in asking them for more money because they're going to say, wait a minute, you already owe us something. What are you coming back in here for? Then lastly, is this the last part? Yes. Lastly, we have structuring the business profiles and accuracy for underwriting approvals. Here's what this means. We like to make sure that the business, apart from it being set up the right way, we want to make sure that everyone is up to date with any updates that have been made. So if you have a name change, an address change, if you have a phone number change, if you had a change with owners, if you had an EIN number change, like any change, make sure that it's updated everywhere. And so for this example, since the main change that we did was the business address, we made sure that we went 5 levels. This is what I call 5-level changes. And so you want to notify the state, which is going to be where the business is formed. So the Secretary of State website, Department of State website, that is the first place that you want to make those updates. Next is going to be at the federal level. This is going to be with the IRS. Third is going to be the financial level. So if you have bank accounts, or if you have credit union accounts already set up with that maybe business address, then obviously update it with them. Hey, this is the new address that we're using. Or if you're obviously starting a new relationship, then you want to bring that new address with you. At the bureau level, this is going to be with TransUnion. This is going to be with Equifax, Experian, and Dun & Bradstreet, since banks are always double checking to make sure what you put on the application is the same thing that they see on the state, which is the same thing that they see when they pull your business credit report. And then fifth and final is going to be at the marketing or the online level. I also like to refer to this kind of like as the local level. Some states require you to have at least 2 publishings online or 2 publishings on a local ad with the new business address. Every state's going to be different, and it's going to vary, right, by state or by region. And so you could just flat out Google, if I make name change in my state, what do I need to do? And sometimes it'll tell you on there, hey, you need to publish it, or hey, you need to run an ad. It needs to be at least 1 campaign. It varies. Some states don't require anything as long as you have everything else changed. But that's why I wanted to give you this, because you may think, and we see this all the time, well, Irv, I made my name change, or I changed the business address, or I changed the phone number on my business, and I still got denied because it says information inaccurate. We're starting to see that a lot more now because they're trying to crack down on fraud and legitimate businesses who have maybe, illegitimate businesses who have been running with bad practices, kind of like what you see with the BOI reports, which is why they started, coming out with this to combat money laundering. Now they're really starting to go in and validate all the information. So always quadruple check it with this. And then you want to make sure that the updated business credit profiles don't have any UCC filings in bad standing, liens, or judgments filed against it. No personal addresses on when the business, or no personal addresses on where the profile is or the business address is. So in other words, if you have a personal address that you use as a business address, you want to notify, okay, this is a home-based business, or vice versa. If you have a personal address that's solely a personal address, you want to let them know, no, this is my personal address. This is my business address. Sometimes you'll see a flip-flop on credit reports where the credit report on the personal side pulls the business address, and then vice versa, the credit report on the business side pulls your personal address. Once you get that cleaned up, it helps open up the funding gates, but it is something that you want to pay attention to, because I've seen people get denied for the smallest stuff. It's dumb sometimes, but believe me when I tell you, it's the smallest thing sometimes that people are unaware of that actually gets them denied. All the owners are listed everywhere. I stated on the OA, so the operating agreements. Business addresses being used don't have any bad media attached to it, kind of like what I mentioned earlier. So there's no scams or anything attached. If you are using a virtual office address, no bad articles written on that address. There was like an alleged fraud that the case opened, and all of a sudden, every time somebody Googles that address, like the local news shows your address, it's a bad look. Banks don't want to deal with it. All business trade lines are properly reporting on there, and this is if it's applicable to you. So if you've already started building up your business trade lines with the banks, or with maybe like a Uline, a Granger, a Quill, Summa office supplies. Make sure that the amounts that are reporting on there are accurate. You are actually receiving credit for it, meaning you're using the accounts, and so you want to actually see it get reporting. That's how you start building out your business credit profile. And then lastly, updated personal credit info of all the owners. So this is one main address, one main name, and then one main employment, which in this case, you can go ahead and list your company, like you yourself as an employee in your company. So this way, all the information that you see here is congruent. So I highly recommend, and let me know. I could probably drop this doc down in the bottom for you guys. Maybe you guys can download it. But let me know if you guys like this style of training. Every now and again, I like to mix it up because a lot of you guys like our other styled videos. But I get messages saying, "Hey, can you do like a video of you breaking down, sitting down with that doc that you do in front of you?" Because it always lets me see it physically. I can actually visualize it. And so let me know if you guys like this stuff, because getting that feedback helps us know if you guys want to keep seeing this style of content. Lets us know if it's worth the time or if you guys just like the other style. But yeah, let me know down in the comments. And other than that, I appreciate you guys for checking us out. Until next time, everyone, I will see you in the next video.